Hello, everyone. My name is Farrah Winters. I'm the Client Relationship Manager at Peterson's. Today, we have a special guest for you, a subject matter expert by the name of Jocelyn McRae. She's of the U.S. Army, SP4, it's her rank, and she is going to give you all a rundown of wonderful test-taking tips and tricks for the ASVAB and AFCT. Go ahead and take it away for us, Jocelyn.
Thanks, Farrah. Thanks. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. And like we have heard, we are going to be talking about those test-taking tips and tricks for the ASVAB and the AFCT. So as we get started here, we are going to be talking today about an overview of the ASVAB and the AFCT. We're going to have a discussion of sample questions, and that's really where we're going to focus most of our time. And then we're going to take a look at those tips and strategies as we go along and recap some of those at the very end. And you will have a chance to ask questions both during and at the end of this presentation. So if you do have questions that are just pressing and you want to put them in the chat right away, you can do that. You certainly can also put them into the chat at the very end. So it looks like most of the folks here joining us today are my Army buddies from years ago, so I appreciate you answering that poll. We do have some from the Air Force, as well as the Coast Guard, DoD, and non-DoD. Thanks so much for answering that. I appreciate it. So what can you expect during this hour? You can expect to hear what you should know about taking the AFCT, how is it different from the ASVAB, and how you can do your best to prepare yourself for the ASVAB. So to answer that, that question about how is it different, it basically is the same question. So when you join the military, you take the ASVAB test. The AFCT is going to give you many of the same questions or sorts of questions on that. But in this case, you are taking that in order to reclassify. So we do want to cover some of the differences between the two. There are some more than that, so we'll take a look at those as we go along. The ASVAB was what I took when I joined the military quite a number of years ago, and it did help to initially give me my MOS, which at this point in time I think is a 25 Sierra, maybe. At the time it was a 29 Yankee, satellite communications. But when you take that ASVAB, it is used by the military to determine your eligibility, ability, and suitability for joining the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, or Coast Guard. Okay, so that's that armed services portion of it. Vocational refers to your career. So how is it that your skills and interests, your understanding of certain subjects, and your experiences lend themselves towards a particular career? Aptitude, that refers to your natural ability to do well at something. So just because you have an aptitude for something doesn't mean you've necessarily ever tried it, but maybe because you have a certain propensity towards it, you're able to do well at it just naturally. And battery, of course, refers to a range of topics or the abilities that are going to be covered. So a battery is a collection of tests, of measurements to see where to place you in the military and whether you are suited for what you're going to be doing. So the AFCT is the Armed Forces Classification Test. This has been in use since 1986. It is essentially a different version of the same questions, the same battery of tests that were covered during the ASVAB. So you will see many similarities between the two. It is also used by the military to see which programs of training and educational programs you are suited to go into. Most often you take it when you are wanting to reclassify. And the biggest difference is that typically when you take the ASVAB, you took it at a MEP station and you took it there so that you were joining the military. You probably took it on a computer. In this case, the Armed Forces Classification Test is almost always taken as a paper and pencil test. When you take it on the computer, it is an adaptive test. When you take it, obviously, paper and pencil, it is not. So we're going to talk some more about those differences as well. On both of those tests, you're going to find the following areas. You're going to find the area of general science, arithmetic reasoning, word knowledge, and paragraph comprehension, which may or may not be combined into verbal expression. You're going to be tested on your mathematics knowledge, electronics information, auto and shop information, mechanical comprehension, and assembling objects. Okay, so those are the different areas. And what I'd like you to do right now is to locate the chat feature. And in that chat feature, I want you to put what area here you think you will find the most challenging, the one that you know the least about. I think for me, it might be that auto and shop information, but you know, that we're not all the same. So I'd like to know where you think you might need some assistance there. As we look at the tests, these are the subjects that you're going to be tested on. Whether you are taking them on the computer or as a paper and pencil test, it will change the number of questions that you are given as you go along. So you can see in these columns here, for each of the areas, the number of questions that you will have in each of those areas if you take it on a computer, typically as the ASVAB test, or whether you do it paper and pencil as the AFCT. 225 questions are given if you're taking it as a paper and pencil test, and only 145 on the computer. You also will notice that this is a timed test, okay? And with this timed test, there are a couple of things to note. You're going to have 154 minutes total to do it on the computer, 149 if you do it paper and pencil. Either way, that's about 2.5 hours to complete the test. Again, the difference is if you're taking it on the computer and you've completed all of the questions in the general science area, you then can move on to the arithmetic reasoning. You then can move on to the word knowledge. So once you complete a section, you move on to that next section at your own pace, as long as the time limit has not been reached. When you're taking it paper and pencil, you generally move along with the entire group. So everyone will be given that much time, and then you will all stop and you will all move on to the next section. Once you have completed the test, your score is going to be evaluated based on the branch of the military that you are wanting to join or that you are already in, and the type of MOS or career path that you are wanting to follow. So it may be a specialty code in the Air Force or something different than MOS, but the score is going to give that evaluator an idea of whether or not you qualify to make that move. So now let's take a look at some of those questions. This is where the real meat and potatoes is. With word knowledge, you are going to have questions very similar to these that are on the screen right now. What I'd like you to do is take a look at these 3 words, come up with the letter that most nearly identifies the meaning of that word, and go ahead and jot it down in front of you. Okay, let's take a look at these. Detrimental, okay, means harmful. Abscond means disappear. And indefinite most nearly means ambiguous. So one of the things that makes these sorts of questions difficult is the lack of context, right? These words are not put in a sentence. So one of the things that you can do as you are learning these words, remembering these words, studying these words, and answering these questions is to put these words in a sentence that you may have heard in the past, right? So you might remember something like, eating too much sugar is detrimental to your health. Detrimental, in this case, means harmful, but you could substitute in those other words. Eating sugar, is it helpful to your health? Probably not. I think we all know that one. So you could cross out that answer right away. Then what I would do is go ahead and substitute in each of the other words. Eating too much sugar is detailed for my health, or eating too much sugar is vague for my health. Neither one of those really makes sense. So that narrows it down to answer B, harmful. In the second case, abscond. Have you ever heard something about maybe a thief absconded? A thief absconded with the jewels, right? Again, in this case, a thief lied about the jewels. Well, that might be the answer. A thief avoided the jewels? Probably not. A thief accompanied the jewels? Maybe. A thief disappeared with the jewels? Yeah, that one makes sense. So take that word and put it in a sentence that you may have heard. Other times, like the word indefinite, you may know things like the prefix or suffix meaning. So in this case, that prefix in refers to not, and definite refers to clear or exact, right? So not clear, not exact would be something that is ambiguous. Okay. Let's take a look at a few more in the area of word knowledge. And you will notice with these that it does take a minute to read through the question as well as read through the answers. Both the last slide where you were asked to give the word most closely in meaning and most opposite in meaning, these sorts of questions will all show up on either the ASVAB or the AFCT, right? That it's closely in meaning, opposite in meaning. All right, are we ready for those answers? Here are those correct answers, all right? Opposite of malevolent is beneficial. Opposite of perpetual, something in perpetual motion, right, is in temporary motion. And augment, if you're augmenting, you're adding to, and in this case, the opposite meaning would be decrease. So how'd you do on those? That's just a brief sample of the word knowledge section of the test. So let's take a look at paragraph comprehension. Paragraph comprehension is an area that many find a bit challenging just because it is a lot of words on the page. So one of the things that I ask you to do here is to read the question or the question stem first. In this case, the thunderstorm referred to in this passage is the sound of, and then read the passage. So I'll give you just a moment or two to read through that. Okay. We watched as the lions gathered around the prey and poked and prodded each other to get a piece of the fallen gazelle. As the lions ravaged the meal, we could hear the groans of thunder, like the droning hum of a distant thunderstorm that threatens to approach. The thunderstorm referred to in the passage is the sound of the gazelles. No, the gazelles were fallen. The animals hunting, the lions eating, or a brewing weather event. Your correct answer here was lions eating, right? Towards the end, the narrator used a similar, a simile, sorry, to compare the lions eating to a thunderstorm. So again, with this one, exactly what I want you to do is to go ahead and read that sample question. First, that according to the passage, glass first needs to be heated because, then go ahead and read through that passage. Okay, we're getting the idea that you need to read that question first. According to the passage, glass first needs to be heated because. Read through those answers. You cannot insert a blowpipe into a cold furnace. High temperatures produce clearer glass. It needs to be hard enough to form a marver. or it needs to be soft enough to form a glob. So we're going to find out why that glass needs to be heated. Before glass blowers can work with glass, it must first be heated in a furnace. Once it reaches an internal temperature of 2000 degrees Fahrenheit, the glass becomes malleable enough to create what's called a gob, a gathering of glass at the end of a blowpipe that has been inserted into the furnace. After the gob is formed, the glass blower can then easily roll it along a marver, a flat metal slab that helps shape the glass while also maintaining its temperature. As you read that passage, the glass needs to be heated to be soft enough to form a gob. Now, one of the common things that you will see with these paragraph comprehensions is that they are typically something that is informational in nature, right? So they may be a topic that you are not familiar with. Don't let that throw you. Simply read through that stem, read through all the answers, go back to that paragraph, read it along. Sometimes simplifying those sentences helps you to come up with the correct answer in this case, okay? So before the glass blowers can work with the glass, it must be first heated in a furnace. Okay, you have to heat the glass. That's what the question is actually asking about. That's a clue that your answer is going to be coming up very soon. Once it reaches an internal temperature of 2000 degrees Fahrenheit, the glass becomes malleable enough to create what's called a gob. Now, that whole passage about internal temperature of 2000 degrees Fahrenheit, that is not an important fact within this paragraph to helping you find why it needs to be heated. It tells you how it is heated. It's heated to 2000 degrees Fahrenheit, but not why. So start to break down the passage into little chunks that help you find the answer itself. Okay. Those are a few examples of the paragraph comprehension. Having a great vocabulary, being able to read with detail in mind, those are two skills that you really want to focus on as you are taking this. We're going to move on to arithmetic reasoning, the AR section, right? A university is attended by 7,000 students and 3,850 of them are on meal plans through the university's cafeteria system. What percentage of students are on meal plans? Okay. The good news is that when you're working on this section on the test, you will have scratch paper to work with, right? You'll have a paper and pencil, you'll be able to do that, but you will not have a calculator. You won't have your phone. So if your math skills need some brushing up, now is the time to do that. Let's take a look for that correct answer. In this case, the correct answer is C, right? And when you're doing arithmetic reasoning or any kind of math problems, there are certain words that have certain meanings in math. And so you may want to look up some of these, practice with some of these. In this case, some mental math may have helped you here as well. If you know that half of 7,000 is 3,500, those 3,850 students that are on that meal plan, you know that that number is greater than half. Right away, that helps you to narrow out A and B. A and B cannot be the correct answer as those both represent less than half. So it's between C and D. The other way that you may have chosen to answer this is rather than dividing 3,850 out of 7,000, that out of needs to divide, you may have taken both of those answers, C and D, and said 58% of 7,000 means to multiply and 55% of 7,000 means to multiply. And you could have found the correct answer that way. Okay. Let's take a look at one more in this category. A factory makes buttons for a variety of textile and other uses. Each year, about 18% of the buttons in this factory that this factory creates are sold directly to a large clothing manufacturer, ABC Clothing. If the factory produces 12,000 buttons a day, how many buttons remain each day to distribute to other customers after ABC Clothing gets their share? Make sure that you have read that question carefully. Let's take a look here. If you read this question carefully, you hopefully got the correct answer. But if you were a little lax in your reading skills and kind of skimmed over it, answer A is that most common incorrect answer, right? The question asked how many buttons remain each day to distribute to other customers after ABC Clothing gets their share. So doing that calculation, 18% of the 12,000, that 2,160 is what goes to ABC Clothing. The next step of that problem is to take the 12,000 and subtract that 2,160, ending up with 9,840. The other way that you may have come up with the answer to this one is you may have said, oh, if 18% are going to ABC, that leaves 82% to go to all other customers. And you may have narrowed it down to just this final step of 82% of 12,000, coming up with that answer directly. Okay. Couple of different ways to answer this question in arithmetic reasoning. Let's try one more. Valeria wants to get new carpet for her home office. It costs $5 per square yard to get her preferred color. What will it cost to carpet her office if her office is 15 feet by 24 feet? So here you notice one of the first things is that it's not a percentage. Not all these questions are going to be about percentages. This is, again, though, a multi-step problem. So what will it cost to carpet her office if her office is 15 feet by 24 feet? As you're doing this problem, one of the first things that may have become evident to you is the fact that in this problem, they're talking both about feet and yards, right? So you have to know that 3 feet equal 1 yard, that 9 square feet equal 1 square yard. Okay, so you had to do some conversions there in this. The first step that you are going to do is to determine the size or the area of her room, right? So the 15 feet by 24 feet, that gives you 360 square feet. Okay, knowing that 9 square feet equal 1 square yard, you're going to take that 360 square feet, divide it by 9, and come up with 40 square yards. That's what she needs to purchase. 40 square yards. When you multiply that 40 square yards by the $5 per square yard, you're going to come up with $200. Okay. $200 for that one. So in this, the reason that I chose this problem to do with you is that there will be times where you're expected to know kind of standard conversions like these. You won't be expected to know things like 5,000 whatever feet in a mile, but things like this that are fairly standard, 3 feet in a yard. Yes, you'll need to know those kinds of conversions in order to answer these problems successfully. Let's try one more of these to really get you thinking. In this case, Kai is organizing a field trip for elementary students. If passenger vans can hold 14 passengers, how many vans will be needed to transport these 75 students? Okay, we ready with those answers? Let's take a look at this one. The math on here is pretty straightforward, right? You could come up with the problem 75 divided by 14. That's going to tell you exactly, how many students are going to fit on those 5 buses. You're going to have 5 buses. But if you only order 5 buses, you're only going to have 70 of these kids that got to go on this field trip, right? 5 are going to be left over. That 0.3 bunch of students isn't going to get to go on that field trip. So although 5 might have been your initial answer, when you read through the question again to double check your work, you would see that those additional 5 students would need 1 more van to get to the field trip on. Okay. So very, very important that as you take a look at these, that you've read through the problem, you've read through the answer, because this is a reasoning section. Does your answer make sense? Is that a reasonable answer? Go back through and take a look at these. Now, I say go back through, remembering that on the paper and pencil test, you will have that many minutes for that section of questions, and that yes, you can move forwards and backwards within that section if you need to. But taking all of the time to check and double check your answers is always a great strategy. Okay. So hopefully you're doing fairly well so far. Go ahead and put in the chat as we move on to one more section. Put in the chat how you're feeling about how you're doing so far. You doing an excellent job, a great job, a good job, an okay job? You're kind of like, yikes. Go ahead and put that into the chat for me. And we will move on to your mathematics knowledge. Now, in arithmetic reasoning, you may have noticed that there was more than one way to solve those, and they were generally word problems, right? The difference between the questions in that section and the difference in this section of mathematical knowledge is that here is just a straight math problem laid out for you to solve, right? There will be many types of these, but go ahead and take a look at these two. Here we go. 50% of x equals 42, then x equals 84, right? You have to have double that number so that half of it equals 42. Again, a percentage. If x plus 5 equals 7, then x is equal to 2. If it's been a while since you've done some algebraic problems, those are ones that you need to practice with, okay? Let's try a few more of those. Okay. X squared minus y squared divided by x minus y. And you're going to simplify the following expression, the square root of 27 divided by 3, or 27 over 3. We've got some guesses, some who worked out the problem. Let's see. X squared minus y squared divided by x minus y equals x plus y. And the simplification of that expression is 3. So those 4 categories are probably the main focus for you in terms of overall performance on the test. Those are the 4 areas that are common to every MOS evaluation, that are common to whether, common to your eligibility. So you want to focus on those 4 areas. But we're going to take a look at some of the other areas just to be sure to let you know what you need to anticipate for those other areas. So let's go ahead and take a look at those. In electronics information, obviously, you're going to be asked things about working with electronics, things that you know in the area of electronics, right? So if you wanted to allow electrical current to flow in one direction while also restricting electrical current in another direction, what type of semiconductor? The type of semiconductor that you would need is an auto and shop. Purpose of a manifold. These are things that kind of either you know them or you don't. You have that ability in that area. So in this case, the silicone rectifier diode is going to be the one that you're going to use for that current flow and current restriction. And in the auto and shop, a manifold distributes gas or other fluids from a single channel to an area where multiple points meet, right? So if you are looking to reclassify into an area that is heavy on electronics or heavy in the area of auto and shop, you're going to want to brush up in areas like these if this is not something that you are have an aptitude for. Okay. In the areas of mechanical comprehension and assembling objects, take a look at these two questions. These are the question types that you may see in these areas. Assembling objects, you'd want to take that first block, and what shape could you make from assembling those together, A, B, C, or D? Okay, sweating usually occurs in pipes that are, or pipes that contain, and it's usually in pipes that contain cold water. And also option A, right? There we go. So these are samples of the types of questions that you will see. And now I really want to get into how is it that you are preparing for this test, right? You've already begun that preparation by attending today, and I'm very, very happy that you did. I think that this is very beneficial in helping you understand this is the beginning of your path. And now from here on out, you need to do things like setting goals, right? So the best place to practice, the best place to prepare is dantes.peterson.com. Once you go there, you're going to know more about that test format, how that test is scored, and you're going to be able to create your study plan. Really, really important that from here on out, you've taken those practice tests, you've set the schedule for what your study schedule is going to be before the day that you need to take that test. And you're going to be able to use dantes.peterson.com to be able to go ahead and move yourself forward to improve your skills before actually taking that test, right? That address is right there at the bottom of the screen, dantes.petersons.com. Hopefully you have written that down somewhere. You've gotten out your camera, you've taken a screenshot, you've taken a photo with your phone, but make sure that you know that website. In terms of general guidance, things that I want you to know, you want to get plenty of rest the night before the test. Be sure that you have eaten breakfast that morning or eaten something before you've gone to take the test, right? You want to be sure that you're wearing comfortable clothing. Those scratchy little tags and the shoes that are bugging your big toe, make sure that you're wearing something that's comfortable, and know that you've prepared. If you've taken the time really up until that point to do your studying, to do your practicing, to set your goals, you're going to be just absolutely fine on the test. Okay? On the day of the test, really, really important, read all of those instructions, read all the directions. I know all of us have taken many, many of these sorts of tests, and sometimes you feel like you can skip right over the directions. Don't. The directions are there to give you that guidance. They will help you find the information that you know for this specific test. So read the directions every single time. They also help to put you in the right mindset for taking the test. So important that they are there. Read all those answer options. Don't skip any questions. If you are taking it via paper and pencil, don't make sure that you have not skipped over any. If you're taking it on the computer, you're going to have to answer that question to move on to the next question. But on paper and pencil, really, really important that you stay aligned to the question that you're at. And if you do skip a question, make sure that you've gone back and it hasn't misaligned your answers to the question numbers. If you have additional time, make sure that you've gone back and check through those, right? So it is slightly different if you're taking it on a computer as opposed to taking paper and pencil. The computer tests are adaptive, so don't guess on those. But if you are taking it paper and pencil, go ahead and guess. Put an answer down there. You've got a 1 in 4 chance of being right, and even higher than that if you can actually narrow it down some. The things that I want you to know from today, these strategies will help. It's a whole big long list, right? If you're going to make a guess, make sure it's an educated guess. If you've got it narrowed down to just B, C, or D, you're one up on having all 4 options there. Avoid those tricky traps. So make sure that you've read the question, that you've read it over a second time, that you've been sure that you've answered that question. Don't get hung up. If you're taking it paper and pencil, go ahead and move on, but move back to it. The very last one, to diagnose your strengths and weaknesses, do that prior to taking the test. Make sure that you're focusing your energy where it's really going to help you the most. So what I would like you to do right now is to go ahead and type in the chat one more time. Which one of these strategies do you think you will use to really improve your performance? Okay. Yeah, I'm seeing that practicing under test-like conditions. I think that's a great answer. In other words, if you're one of those people that think that you are going to study best at Starbucks with a lot of commotion around, that's not probably going to be the environment that you're testing under. So maybe you want to practice in a quiet room off by yourself. Okay. If you get a lot of test anxiety, find out the things that you're able to do to calm yourself. Right? My daughter used to put a star at the top of her paper to let herself know that she was going to do a great job on whatever she wrote on that paper. That was her first grade strategy for doing well throughout school. Make sure that you know those strategies that are going to make you successful. Okay. We've got some time now for questions. I'm going to pass it back to Farah, and she's going to help you out with any questions that you still may have. Go ahead and put those into the chat.
I believe I tried to answer this question at the beginning of the presentation that Ms. Ann Browning asked about the ASVAB and the AFCT, whether or not there's the same guessing penalty on either of those. Aren't the times different for the ASVAB and the AFCT? I think Jocelyn would know that, but I think the times are different for the ASVAB and the AFCT, depending on how they are administered. I think I saw someone else in the chat say that the AFCT is now offered as a computerized version. I'm sure that is true, but I'm sure there's also the paper and pencil version that is for the AFCT.
Right. And it's important to know going into it which type of test you're going to be taking, whether it is computer or whether it is paper and pencil, because that does determine the number of questions as well as the amount of time that you're going to be allotted.
Do you know if there's a penalty, Jocelyn?
There is a penalty whenever it's a computerized test and it's adaptive. So kind of what that means is that many people report that when they're taking it on the computer, they notice that the questions are getting slightly more difficult or slightly easier. And they're wondering, what is the reason for that? Because it is adaptive. They want to challenge you to the edge of where you can be challenged, as well as not make it so challenging that you're getting frustrated. So it does adapt to kind of how well or how poorly you're answering the questions, right? So it may make them a little more difficult, a little bit less difficult. You're not going to be able to trick that. So don't just keep guessing and guessing and guessing, because there will be a penalty that it will either lower or raise the level of the types of questions that you're getting. And it may be in a manner that does not really describe who you are or how, or your ability to do well on that.
Wonderful. And I'm glad you mentioned that the test is adaptive. If any service members wanted to practice with an adaptive system, they can use the OASK for that. Our pre and post, our pre-assessment is adaptive along with our modules. I think you can go ahead and go to the next slide.
Okay.
Thank you. So to log in, you'll go to the website, dantes.petersons.com. You'll put in your email or username, put your password in. It'll take you to this landing page where you'll start the OASK course. At the top, you have your navigation bar, you have your modules, and then we also have an announcement bar where we put announcements every now and again. It's where you'll find updated videos. It's where you will see whether or not we have updated features along with the OASK as well. And I believe that is the end of our presentation. If anyone has any more questions, they can drop them in the chat for me or Jocelyn. Thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you so much. And I think it's great. This is all free. So make sure that you are going here, you're doing your practice, you're setting up your plan, and good luck.
Yes, thank you so much. Jocelyn, before we let you go, there was one final question in there, or one additional question rather, from Javonda Curry. Good morning, Javonda. And it's regarding the highest GT score. Initially it was 130, but she's saying that their tester got it at a 137 this morning, and I'm seeing a 145 in here as well.
I think that does, the scores and the scoring does vary depending upon the branch of service and the weighting of those various categories. So it will change from time to time.
Okay, and that does make sense. You mentioned that going in, and it's going to be based on the branch. Yeah. All right, well, I must be the first to say here, you did a fantastic job. I've learned a lot about the program, and that's always encouraging. It'll help fulfill those questions that may trickle in from our counselors out in the field. It will allow for a spirited discussion and encourage people toward using such a productive tool. And so we appreciate your mastery over the subject, and thank you for sharing it with our audience here this morning.